things. And, I remember sitting there like listening to you and even trying to give advice. And I'm like, dude, I still haven't even figured out my mess, So we both come a long way, man.
Yeah.
Yep.
And we had that same meeting and that same conversation while I'm in the middle of my mess.
Yep.
And I love God's grace and his mercy because he's still giving sound advice from the individuals that should be listened to it as much as they're giving it. And that's what preaching is to me is people go, dang, man, you just don't mind stepping on my toes. I'm like, my toes.
Yeah.
Like God has just got a hammer to my toes at the same time. So
So it's a hammer on your toes. That's what makes them look like that?
yes.
Okay. Got it.
Yes.
Sorry, that's from my wife. She's got some kind of fascination with your ankles and toes.
It's just the fact that my ankles and my legs aren't the same color.
Are you slow?
My summer and my fall are, so I have my fall color down here, my summer color up here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're in the middle of service the other day, and we've got a group chat, Morgan and I and David and Shanna, and I look down at my phone on Do Not Disturb, and of course, it goes off in the middle of service because she's the only one that rings through Do Not Disturb, and it's Morgan sending a picture of David's ankles because he didn't wear socks that day. And she's like, look at them ankles.
Yeah. And he had like a line.
At least you didn't get cankles. That's a plus.
And she's got a thing with ankles, though, man. Like, we were walking in church one day, and she's like, you've got just the daintiest ankles. And I was like, thanks, I guess. She's like, well, your calves are just so big that maybe your ankles are small. And I'm like,
maybe your ankles are
You just
normal.
got beast calves, man.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
You got big calves.
Yeah, the result
Calves.
of carrying around nearly 400 pounds for a long time.
You just gotta let that woman know that these are man calves right here. Like these, it makes the ankles look small.
Hey, tell her you got mankles.
Mankles?
Males.
Man ankles.
Well, as per normal, I think that's going to turn into a thing where I just start hitting record and you guys don't know, and we'll get into it. So I don't know, it's like about 2 minutes in now. So
We cannot be.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I love it.
That's
Let's
okay.
go.
My wife's going to be laughing at this.
Yeah, we're not going to cut it out either.
Yes.
So welcome back to Groundbreakers Podcast. This is Taylor.
Galen Johnson.
David Nelson.
And today we have a pretty special guest with us. Not his first podcast. He actually had a running podcast for a while where he was a host. There's going to be a lot of folks in this area that know the name and know you.
Mm-hmm.
And if memory serves, if I can, I think this will be the first time that you have told the whole story from your viewpoint. From if I can say it, from a man that has gone through it and has allowed God to heal him.
Yeah, especially in a forum that's public that anyone can listen to. I've obviously had an opportunity to share my story with some individuals, and then I have a really good friend that's he's a CEO of some homeless shelter down in the Houston area, and I got to do a retreat with his recovery group last year and share my story to a group of men that are in recovery in his in that rescue mission there in Houston. But in the capacity of sharing it with a broad audience, of going on the World Wide Web, man, where anyone can just download and listen to. I haven't really done that yet, and I think the reason behind being willing and even wanting to do that is, I think I've come to a point where what do you guys say? The message is in the mess.
Yeah, my mess becomes a message.
My mess becomes a message.
Yes, sir.
And so
Maybe a cautionary tale.
Yeah. I think it's I want my story to be something that could help people avoid the same pitfalls that I've fallen into, but also I think it's also important that that people know that there is restoration and redemption. There's life on the other side of your worst season.
Go ahead and start typing it, David.
And
Well, you should probably introduce yourself
Mm-hmm.
10 minutes talking.
Yeah, my name's Nathan Rogers. I'm a man that's been through it all. I think the quick intro to me, especially in context of
Before we do that,
yeah,
we got our intro music provided by our last guest, Mike Gentry.
Yeah, let's do
from he doesn't know it, but we're going to call it
MG.
the MG experience. Here we go.
I like it.
Hand on the plow, keep your head down, keep pushing forward now. We're breaking ground, can't do it alone. Many are called, let's bring them all home.
So I don't know if the episode has been released where I talked about that, because that's a full song.
Mm-hmm.
We'll get the full song posted to the Spotify. They may, or to the podcast. It may get pulled because it's music instead of, I don't know. I don't know the rules to that, but I had many hours editing, because that's two different sections of the song that I spliced together so that it would be less than 30 seconds, because all the pros say that your intro song needs to be 20 to 30 seconds at the most. And if you listen real closely, you can still hear, I can hear the splice. And so I'm really leaning in this season to almost professional, so that there's always an excuse for when I miss it.
There you go.
So
Room to grow.
there's always room to grow. Yeah. So
And kind of like Nathan was talking about earlier, just about your experience that you went through. For all the men out there, understand that we've all been through something.
Sure.
And what you're about to talk about is to really lift men up, to know there's, like you said, there's redemption, there's God's grace, there's His love. I've been broken. God not rebuilt me, He's rebuilding me. Until my last breath, He's going to be rebuilding me.
I think that's what salvation is.
Yeah.
I think religion says that salvation is an instantaneous thing, and I've got sitting here just some of the most biblical based wisdom, and probably the best Bible teacher that I know. Matter of fact, the dude actually taught the Bible at the collegiate level for many years, but. And so what I'm saying is you may disagree, but I think that salvation is a choice followed by a journey after that.
Sure. Paul said in Philippians, he said, work out your salvation with fear and trembling.
Yeah.
I think that, that verse is not, it's not work for your salvation with fear and trembling.
Right.
It's work out your salvation with fear and trembling. And the idea is that I think the fear and trembling part is understanding how unworthy we are of the grace and the mercy of God, and the salvation that's been extended to us. And, we'll get into this as we talk about my story a little more, but I think working out that salvation with fear and trembling has been what has sustained me and got me to where I am today through the mess of my story. There was recently, I ran into a man that has known me for years. He was a member of the church that I pastored, and he asked me, where I was spiritually, and he asked me, if I was in church. I told him absolutely. I attend church every Sunday. I'm a member of a church here in town. Love my pastor, love my church. Shout out Pastor Mike, Oakland Heights, and in that church, I've began to serve. Myself and another fellow, we co-teach a small group and serve on their building committee, and I'm serving in the church greeter ministry, like those type things. And he's like, man, really? He's like, I just really felt like after everything that happened, that you might have just walked away from God or walked away from the church. And man, that kind of broke my heart. It's like I know I failed and I know I sinned, but and like I said, we can get a little deeper into this as we walk through this, but actually in a lot of ways, that downfall, that tragedy is what brought me even closer to God.
Right.
My relationship with God, it was actually stronger the days and weeks after the the great collapse, if you will, than it was in probably the 2 to 3 years leading into it. And man, that's the goodness of God. Like, He sustains us,
Amen.
even in our worst days, and even when our worst days are self-inflicted. It's like the book of Hosea in the Old Testament. We're Gomer. We run, and we are the serial harlots, and yet God just keeps pursuing us. And man, He not only did He not stop pursuing me, but man, He ran to me, and he started trying to pull me out of the wallow, and I understand the grace of God and the mercy of God more now. Like, I taught on the grace of God for years, preached about it and believed in it. But man, I didn't understand it until the last 2.5, 3 years.
Not until you get broke down and you actually you put yourself in that position. It's like, I was there, and I always believed in God and everything, but not until I was broken did I really get His hands on me, and just, man, it's a.
His hands were there. His hands were there. I just think that what you're saying is your flesh had to get out of the way for your spirit to be able to feel His hands there.
And the flesh has to be broken. I love your references to Hosea and God being Hosea and we're Gomer, and how He just continues to come and or wait, and then going back and allowing God to be visually pictured in how He comes to retrieve us, because Hosea ends up giving everything he has to retrieve Gomer, and Jesus became our everything to retrieve us.
He did.
And as you were talking about that, that point where reverence came in, and that's the place I don't want to ever get to. And I think having you around us has blessed me in that way, to where I can surrender my vulnerable places, because of course we'll get into that conversation. But when I look at your situation and I go, man, I'm so glad I have men around me who will call me on my crap. And sometimes, like David with Bathsheba, I don't know that he had men around him who would call him on his bad moments, and he makes that last bad choice that cost him so much.
Yeah.
But then he's listed as a man after God's own heart. And I think sometimes the body of Christ forgets the frailty of their own ness and how easy it is for us to fall into different things. I ask people all the time, are you a sinner? And they have to weigh that, because I know what happens in that moment. No, I haven't killed anybody. I don't commit adultery. I don't steal. And they're trying to weigh their sin against the greatest sins that they think. And he says, for all have sinned, and so I just think it's so awesome that you can be transparent enough that we can hear in our own hearts that reverence for God, to like, God, I don't want to get outside of that relationship with you, and I've also fallen, and I've also committed adultery, and God has restored me and brought me back and forgave me and all of those things. And so I think what an honorable man who can tell their hard story, and I may have gotten ahead of your story, their hard story to people who will first sit in judgment, and then in reality, all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. I was praying over that today. Like, how can people cast that first stone? And it's going to be because they won't weigh their own stuff.
Yeah.
I want to come back to that people set in judgment part eventually, so don't let me forget that.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
But I do think it's important probably that I tell the story, right, to lay some context down.
Absolutely.
All right.
So for those of you listening who may not know my story, let's go back to the first Wednesday of October in 2023. So just shy of 3 years ago. I was with a group of friends in West Virginia. I was up there with a nonprofit group that I worked with. I was on the board for. We were planning an Christian event, and I'm sitting at lunch, and I get a phone call. I don't recognize the number. I answer the phone, and it's a man that I didn't recognize the voice. And his question to me is, "Are you the man that's sleeping with my wife?" And instantly I knew who it was. That was on Wednesday, first Wednesday in October. On Friday, my wife filed for divorce. And on Sunday, my resignation was read to the church I pastored. To give you some context on that, I served as a pastor in multiple capacities for over 20 years. I had been serving as the lead pastor of a church here in Longview since 2010, so for over 13 years. And, in a moment, my pastorate was over, my marriage was over, and I pretty much lost everything. And the reason is because I had chosen to enter into an off and on again affair relationship, physical relationship with a woman that was not my wife, from 2021 to 2023. And when that became public and known, that ended pretty much everything I knew. My life was wrapped around family and ministry up until that point, and within a week, I found myself literally homeless, without a job, without a ministry, and without a wife and without a family. And I don't say all that to, hey, oh, poor pitiful Nathan, because I actually brought all that on myself. Right. That was my doing. Like, I chose to do that. There's a lot of things that we could get into about, like, what led you to that, making that decision, and, how did you get there? Like, how were things at home, or what was the temptation and things like that. And, we can talk about those things, and I don't mind getting into that. I think it's more important that we talk about what happened after. The most important thing was this. I chased ministry, family, things to the detriment of my relationship with God and my spiritual health. I put all of that in front of it. And I was working so hard to build a church and be all of these things that my spiritual relationship suffered. And eventually, as a result of that, my mental health suffered. I reached a point of burnout. I honestly, in 2020 and into 2021, I seriously considered walking away from the church. I talked and asked for a sabbatical that was, it wasn't really met with favor, and I thought, well, I probably just need to walk away. And I didn't do it. And, all of that led to, everything that happened and the choices I made. Again, those were my choices. But what it did is it opened up a door of vulnerability that Satan was able to take advantage of. And, it was my choice. I never want to try to qualify that as it being anything else. Like, I sinned. But Satan used it to destroy a lot of things, a church, a family, a ministry, and it, like I said, at the time, not only was I serving, I was on the board for a children's home and orphanage in the area. I was pastoring a church. I was teaching at a local Bible college and seminary. I had a lot of things going on. All those things were taken away, and because of that, it became very public. There was a lot of chatter and gossip about my situation, because when a pastor and a man of God falls, it's heartbreaking to some, and others revel in it. But it's newsworthy to people, and it became bigger than me, and it was a catalyst moment in my life. it was a time when I had a choice of which direction I was going to turn. And, man, I turned to my mom and dad, who are amazing people who love me in it. I turned to some really close friends. One of them sitting right here at this table. I know we've talked about Chris Rigsby and his role in starting our group. The day that everything became public and unwound on me, I sat with Chris on the porch of his barn dominium and wept on his shoulder. You know, he was one of the people that were there for me and some others. And, I just knew there was only one place to turn, and that was back to God. And it's been a journey, but that's my story. Like, that's where I am. That's who I am. And to give some context to this entire podcast and what we're going to be talking about, I just want people to know that that's where I'm at. And that was, like I said, that was 2.5, almost 3 years ago. And God's brought me a long way in a short time.
Well, I remember the first meeting you came to, and you telling that story, I could tell it was really, really, really painful.
Mm-hmm.
But you got it out. Then you started moving around in different areas, different states, and talking about it. And so now you're here, open in public. So I think
it's still painful.
Oh,
yeah,
100%.
Yeah,
but
there's no doubt.
But you're able to speak about it, and because there's good, and the backside of it is that God give you grace and love on it, and He's pulled you back up. And, you know, that's what we need to understand. No matter what you do, God's always there on your backside.
Absolutely.
He's always like Taylor was saying, His hand's always out.
Yeah.
We just got to grab it.
Have you guys ever seen that picture of it's taken from underwater, and Jesus is standing on top of the water, and his hand is breaching the surface, and it's obviously a depiction of Peter walking on the water and when he began to sink. I saw that picture for the first time probably a month or two after all this happened, and man, that painting was so crucial in my understanding that God was reaching for me.
Yeah.
One of the things I remembered whenever I found out about what was going on, and I'll never forget it. Hey, Pastor, it's Wednesday. Why are you at CrossFit today?
Yeah, to give some context, I came in to work out on a Wednesday evening.
I think it was the Wednesday.
It was 2 weeks after, because I'd went and spent a week in Arkansas, but
Yeah.
it was 2 weeks after I'd resigned. And I walked into the gym on a Wednesday night and ran it. First person I talked to was you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you said, "What are you doing here on a Wednesday night? Aren't you supposed to be at church?"
Yeah. I did a really good job with my mascara today, so I can't get into it real deep. But, and I think I've told you this before, but the love that you showed and the vessel that you were, that God used you as the vessel to pour that love into me whenever I was so blatantly wrong, obviously, like looking back at it, and how silly I was being whenever I was walking around saying that I was agnostic.
Yeah.
But you just poured that love into me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think because you were literally at the darkest place that you'd ever been. And so on my mind today, as I was thinking about topics to discuss, I think that mental health is just for a moment. In 2024 and 2025, there was a Barna, B-A-R-N-A, Barna report.
Mm-hmm.
So what that is the Barna group, they will go and speak with pastors.
They're a Christian research organization. They're similar to, if you've ever heard of the Gallup study, it's a Christian version of like that. Yeah.
So it says nearly 1 in 5 senior pastors in the U.S. have contemplated self-harm or suicide within the past year.
Mm-hmm.
It goes on to say it's a very high-risk profession. They also dug into Duke Divinity School research in this. And, of course, folks, you can find all this information on Google. There was a few numbers that were just shocking to me. loneliness. 26% of pastors who feel more alone and have faced thoughts of self-harm or suicide in the past year. And 52% of pastors reported that they were not receiving any care for their mental health. There's, David, who is that guy, that pastor that we send videos back and forth? Is it Lionheart Church?
Yeah.
The pastor there?
Yes.
He had a message one time that talked about how religion has gotten ministry so messed up that we look at the profession of ministry as a full-time job, but the reality is that we should be building the ministry. We come to the building to equip the ministry to go out.
Yeah.
And
I mean, that's the job description of a pastor, is to equip the saints for the work of the ministry.
exactly. Yeah.
And that's one of those unfortunates because you don't see it very often.
No, you don't.
You know,
I mean,
and that's just the reality of that. And just like your situation, I wanted to make sure and hit on this. They got a couple of first time seeing you. The first time I meet you is at group. Wow. And you're sitting in this chair with your head kind of down, and we're having a real pointed conversation.
Yeah.
And I didn't know the conversation was dancing around even your situation. I'm talking about my situation as a pastor, struggling in my marriage. And you're having to hear all that.
I mean, I knew where you were because I've been there.
Yeah. And then you lean back as much as you could, raise up out of your brokenness and speak nothing but word. And the thing that blesses me in this moment that brings me to tears is that we don't have enough of those men. We have a lot of men who can joy along with us and tell us, you're all right, she's wrong, and you're right, and all of this other stuff. But you just spoke word to me, not even out of the lamented state that you were in. You spoke the word of God concerning my marriage, concerning my covenant, concerning my responsibility as a husband. And I had no idea. I still didn't know the next meeting. I think we were there probably 3 meetings before I realized.
Yeah, it was a month later whenever you were getting ready to go to that first retreat.
Yeah.
And we were talking about whether you were going to share your story or not, and had the opportunity to pray over you.
Yeah, I remember that.
And this dude is just like, he's walking around just like somebody had just smacked him with the stupid stick. He's just the whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there I am loving on your son and, you know, just seeing God move in his life as well, and so grateful for that. And I'm grateful myself for being able to walk with a man that we blew it. And this group, and I love this about us, because when I see what Scripture says about how the body is supposed to be a restorative makeup, we're supposed to, if a man is caught in a fault, we're supposed to, he repents, we help build him back up, we set him aside for a period of time of restoration and reconciliation. And very rarely do we see that. What we see most of the time is the judgment of man, because it's easier to judge someone than it is to say, hey, let's walk with this brother on the road to restoration. Again, for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. And we forget that we're all sinners. And that takes me back to Jesus and the woman caught in the very act of adultery. They bring this woman caught in the very act of adultery to Jesus to be stoned. They need his affirmation like they needed Paul or Saul when they stoned Stephen. So they just needed Jesus to give them a nod. But what he gave them was proper information that we send out today. He that is without sin, let him cast the first stone. That's an introspective communication that causes them to have to now weigh the sin in their hearts, because the sin in their hearts said, hey, let's go take this woman caught in the act of adultery and pull her out of this situation, not the man, but the woman, and bring her before Jesus, because he's going to judge her. And I'm so glad that he gets to judge us. I'm so glad that you had to go back to the judge and you had to allow the judge himself to begin the healing process. And it's a dying, like you were saying, it's a dying process where you have to make a decision. Lord, you say to live for you. The only way I'm going to live is I got to die to myself to live for you. And so I
think, I told you I wanted to come back to that judgment thing, both God's judgment and the judgment of people. I think this is a good spot to jump in there. One of the things that I've had to accept in this is when we talk about and when we say only God can judge me or God's the only judge and things like that, like you hear that from a lot of people, Christians, especially like fringe Christians, they love to throw that around, right?
One might say lukewarm.
But for me, through all of this, one of the things that I have learned is when you say God's my judge, only God can judge me, God's the only judge, that means that you are submitting and you're willing to allow God to judge you. And here's the beauty is when I submitted myself to that and I said, God, I'm yours, you can judge me, whatever consequence. It's like, when you come to a point as a child that you've done the worst and it's like, okay, whatever I get from dad when he gets home, I deserve it. When you get to that point where you're like, okay, God, and then all of a sudden what you're met with is grace. Yeah. God can judge me and he can pour out his punishment on me. He can pour out and you know what? He did it. He poured it out, but he poured it out on Jesus on the cross.
That'll preach.
Man, when you realize that what you deserve was poured out on Jesus, it just, because I deserved all the condemnation I received. And going back to the human judgment part, I remember, I've told this story before, I think in group, but I remember I didn't want to go out in public because I felt like everyone in town was talking about me. Even if they weren't, in my mind, everyone in town was talking about me.
Yeah, I was ready to fight them. I remember we went to Fuzzy's Taco one night.
Yeah.
And I was like, dude, don't worry about it. I'm going to fight him.
Yeah.
don't worry about it.
That was agnostic, Taylor.
That was.
But anyway, I was in, I didn't have any food. I was living alone, and a friend of mine was so gracious to let me stay in his house for a few months until I got on my feet. And he had a vacation home, lake house that he let me stay in. And I didn't have any food, and I'd come over to Hallsville to visit some friends. And on the way home, I ran in Brookshire's here in Hallsville. I used to live literally just right down the street from here, just a block away. And so I'm in Brookshire's, and I run into a woman that I knew. And, I got the pity eyes, are you okay? Oh, yeah, I've been really praying about, for you. And I thought, hey, okay, that's cool. I mean, she was kind, and then she went around the aisle, and I was on one aisle and she was on the other aisle. But, you can kind of see through those aisles. And I don't think she knew that I was, and she came up on another woman, and boy, they started dogging me. Just dogging me,
She was praying. Now she's talking about you.
Oh, dude, what a piece of trash that guy is! You ain't gonna believe who I just ran into over there on the the Frosted Flakes aisle, and dude, they just garbage dog cussing me in the other aisle, And I got bitter, I got angry, and because I was being judged hard, and I probably, they were. That's why I've told people, there's been some rumors about me, that people have told, and I've come back and I've said, listen, man, you can just tell the truth because it's bad enough. You don't have to say the rumors because the truth of what I did is bad enough. That's salacious enough if you need a salacious story. But anyway, so I started talking to a friend of mine. One of my best friend in the world is also a licensed counselor. So he's both my best friend and my counselor. He lives down in Round Rock, and he's phenomenal. Shout out Tommy. So I was talking to my friend about it. And one of the things that he helped me understand and realize is that reaction is a response to action. That's what it means. And so the reaction that those women had, the reaction that people had to me is the result of my action.
Own it.
And for me to get bitter at their reaction is to not own my action.
Wow.
Whether they react correctly or they react wrongly, it doesn't matter. They would have never reacted had I not done what I done.
Yeah.
And so now when we're 3 years in now, and it's changing. But now when I encounter those reactions, it's just a reminder that this is the consequence. This is the judgment from God. This is the punishment that I paid for my actions. God's grace has got me. I'm going to walk into heaven one day, and He's going to say, "Well done, my good and faithful servant."
Come on.
But on this side of eternity, there is consequence to our action. And that consequence is the result of my action. And so when people react negatively, I can't look at them with bitterness. I have to look back at my own sin and be broken by it.
We call that looking in the mirror.
Mm-hmm. And not Paul, but in John, 1 John, he said the man that looks into the Word of God and then doesn't do it is like a man who looks into a mirror and then walks away and immediately forgets what he looked like.
Mm. Wow.
Yeah. That's why I wanted to come back to that judgment thing, because that's been important. That, like, back to the mental health thing too, that has been one of the most significant things in my healing is ownership. It's to own what I did, the consequences of that, the reactions that come from that. That's on me.
Well, I think that Dave can really lean into that. Obviously we're in the coming up on 3 months into this transition in ministry, but there was a congregation that was built there at the church that we were at, and man, it looked weird, but it was led with, here's what you get. I messed up all of these times, but God's grace restored me. And it really is leaning into that. I once was a mess, but now through His grace, there's a message from it.
Amen.
It doesn't take the weight of that reminder.
It does
right?
not. It does not. And can I read some verses?
Please.
Because I think even though I have to take ownership for that, I do think for those that are dealing with people who have acted in a way that evokes a response. My dad is a wise man, and one of my favorite sayings from my father, he always says, "It's easy to act like a Christian. It's really hard to react like one."
Oh, man.
And
Write that down.
that's good. And this honestly could be the theme verse for Groundbreakers. Galatians chapter 6, 5 verses. Paul said,
verse 1.
Chapter 6, verse 1. He said, "Dear brothers and sisters, if another believer is overcome by some sin, you who are godly should gently and humbly help that person back onto the right path.
Come on.
And be careful not to fall into the same temptation yourself. Share each other's burdens, and in this way, obey the law of Christ," which, by the way, the law of Christ is love. "If you think that you are too important to help someone, you're only fooling yourself. You are not that important.
Ooh.
Pay careful attention to your own work, for then you will get the satisfaction of a job well done, and you won't need to compare yourself to anyone else. For we are each responsible for our own conduct."
So I just obviously I was taking notes, but I'm going to go over to my Bible app.
That's where it was open to.
I was getting ready to read the same thing.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's been one of mine that I come back to over and over again. Mm-hmm. Similar experience, although it wasn't salacious whenever I stepped out on Morgan. The response that I got at one point in time of, I don't know what this Christian portrayal is, but it's disgusting and it oozes, just please don't ever talk to me again. I'm so sorry. Definitely, it's genuine, but I hurt you, and anyways, that Words are hard on that still.
They are. And, I think early on, it was easy for me to focus on the people who I thought were my friends that scattered like roaches when the lights come on as soon as I hit rock bottom. Like there were a lot of people in my life that just disappeared. And I get it. Again, their action reaction, like their reaction was the result of my action. I totally get it.
You think some of those may have been because they just didn't know what to say?
I think that's part of it. I think that if I'm just going to be honest, man, I think it's threefold. I think there were some people in my life that were just really heartbroken and disappointed.
Yeah.
I think because they had me on a pedestal, right or wrong, they did. And when I turned out to not be the person they thought I was, in their minds, I had departed from them because in their minds, I was a fraud. I think there's also some people that just didn't know what to say. They just didn't know how to respond, and the easiest thing for them to do was to separate.
Yeah.
And then I also think that there were some people, and there are always people in your life that the only reason they're there is because they want something from you, and as soon as you can't give it to them anymore, they're gone. And and I'm not saying that's anybody or particular or everyone. I'm saying that, like, I think when I categorize those people that disappeared, it can fall into multiple categories.
Right.
But I think the healthy thing that happened was I started taking an inventory a couple of years ago of the people that were there in my life, the people that that ran towards the fire, and Taylor was not pursuing God when everything fell apart and unraveled in my life. Yet the dude ran to me, which speaks to his heart. It's really interesting because I lost a church. A lot of people, I believe in the power of the church, the true ecclesia, the true gathering, the true body of believers. I believe wholeheartedly in it.
Amen.
And when people go through I don't know how people do it when they hit rock bottom and don't have a church to lean on. Until I went through it, because I didn't have a church to lean on. And again, I'm not saying that accusatory, but I resigned the church that I had pastored for 13 years, and I did not have a church to hold me during that time.
I think your church looked very different, and you went from a great big huge congregation to Nathan party of 4.
Yeah, and so that's what I was going to say. So what happened to me was, man, it's crazy, but of all the people in my life, I had a couple of pastor friends that leaned into me. Very grateful for them. And I had a community of all places, a gym. But it was Taylor, it was Rigsby, it was Daniel Klutz, it was people like that started, Steve Hiddle, that started coming to me in the midst of that time. And honestly, some of these people are great Christian people. Some of them don't claim Christianity or faith at all, but yet these are the people that ran to me. And
then the ones that are so-called ran away.
There was. But man, what I've had to do is shift, Galen, is to choose to lean into the people that were there.
Right.
And not let the bitterness of those who weren't steal my joy.
Come on.
Well, you got to let people in that are going to be a positive to you.
Absolutely.
So then the ones that aren't, they got to go.
And again, I don't hold that against any of those people anymore because I'm owning, that's what I said about the judgment. Like I own their reaction. It's on me.
But you would have never done that unless you got broken.
Yes.
By God.
That's right. And I own that. I own their reaction, but I'm grateful for the people that didn't walk away. And most importantly, I'm super grateful for the people that actually came to me.
Pour into you.
Yeah. There's you remember Cheers, the old 80s TV show?
No.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. I'm that old.
What was it about, right? It's about a bunch of dudes, a bunch of friends that met every day at a bar in Boston.
Yeah.
That's what the show's about. What is, do you remember the theme song?
Where everybody knows my name.
So that's it. And it started out, it said, sometimes you want to go where everybody knows your name.
And they're always glad you came.
And they're always glad you came. You want to go where people know that our troubles are all the same. You want to go where everybody knows your name. You know, when I showed up at Groundbreakers, that's what I found. Like, I showed up at a place where people were glad that I was there, where people cared deeply about me, where people understood that we're all broken and our troubles are all the same. Why does it take a bar jingle to speak to what God's people and God's church should be? And by the way, there's probably somebody that's listening to this right now and going, yeah, but dude, you weren't what you should be. And whoever's thinking that, you're absolutely right. Like, I wasn't what I should be. I was not an example of what a pastor should be. I was not an example of what a husband should be. I was not an example of somebody who calls themselves a follower of Christ should be. And I own that. I own that.
I don't want to share too much of Rigsby's story, but, you know, he and I are so blessed to be able to do, we've got our own little side ministry, if you will, with some Bible studies and assisted livings and nursing homes. And so I've heard the abbreviated version of his testimony enough that I can give his testimony. It's not as impactful because to this day, every time I've heard it, the dude cries every single time. But one of the things that really stuck out to me talking about the bar is whenever he didn't try to walk away. He tried to run away, knowing that it wasn't the right thing because of the way that he was raised. But he would walk back into the church and not feel welcomed, yet turn around and go to that bar, and the doors would open, and it would be arms wide open. Dude, you're back. It's so good to see you. How are you doing? And opinion here. And I'm sorry if you're offended. Religion and tradition have gotten in the way of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, I think that's true. But I also think that, like, one of the things that we have to keep in mind is that religion is always going to be the bane of the church. Judaism in its truest and purest form, Moses meeting in the tent of meeting and speaking to God as a friend, tabernacle worship,
Right.
you know, Israel establishing the temple, like all of those things, like they were not unholy. They were good things, and they were the way that God had established worship. But what happened is, by the time we get to the New Testament, those things had become so consumed by religion that they were far from what God intended. And the Pharisees had turned it into religion. And for us to think that that if the Pharisees could do that with Judaism, with God's chosen people, what makes us think that we can't do that with the church by institutionalizing it and turning it into religious practice?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're hitting the nail on the head. You know, I've had a philosophy, if you will, that whenever the church gets large enough that we need to start having, I mean, obviously, once it gets large enough and you got salaries to pay, it then becomes a business.
Yes, right? It does, yeah.
And whenever we get to that point, the fine line turns into a gray area where we're functioning as a business instead of an ecclesia. And so I think that that's exactly what we're talking about, and why when we look back at the Levitical law and everything that was added to it, instead of the heart posture that was intended with the original commandment, because there was so much black and white. Eventually, the black and white bled together and made gray, and so we needed something to differentiate. It's really hard to portray heart posture.
Yeah, and I think, and I want to step in here and say that, like, I'm not against church buildings, paid pastors, As a matter of fact, I believe that the Bible teaches that a shepherd is worthy of double
his
honor.
hire.
He is.
Yeah.
He's worthy of double honor. You know, you should take care of them. You should take care of the people that shepherd your soul, especially the ones that shepherd your soul. You know, and I can tell you from experience that, like, when I went through my situation, like the people that shepherded my soul, I couldn't put a number on how valuable that was to me. Because really in that moment, I'd lost everything. Money was nothing to me anyway. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so, and I think that, like, I think it's just that we have to keep the main thing, and we have to understand the value of, I mean, because honestly, if you go back, if the church in Jerusalem added 3,000 people one day, added 5,000 people another day, if they were literally, the Bible says that in Acts 2, that the Lord was adding into their number daily those that were being saved. That was an enormous church.
Yeah.
But what did they do? They continued steadfastly in the apostles' doctrine and the breaking of bread from house to house, and they shared their goods, right? They were meeting. They weren't meeting at the mega church tabernacle center. You know, they didn't have a 5,000 seat auditorium that they met in every Sunday. As a matter of fact, what little bit of meeting they did do, they would do it on Solomon's portico, which was one of the porches off the temple. It was the only place that the Jews let them meet. And they didn't even like that. They eventually started getting stoned and killed for doing that. They were meeting from house to house. So they were one congregation, but they weren't really like meeting the whole entirety of them all together. They were meeting in smaller groups and things like that. And, you know, I think that churches become bigger, and I'm doing quote fingers right now, by doing church smaller. And I think that, like, as you grow, there has to be some sort of getting around a table, breaking bread, meeting from house to house, continuing in the apostles' doctrine and fellowship. And, you know, I think where the church has missed that a little bit is we take one individual and we elevate them.
Yeah.
And honestly, this is a lot of what led to probably to, you know, my burnout. Is we elevate them to a position of, you know, their word carries the authority, their power and their leadership and things like this, or and everything leans on them. And then now you've got 100 people, 1,000 people, 10,000 people in some of these mega churches, and they're all looking to one person. And
effectively have put someone on an idol and or put them on a pedestal and made them an idol.
Yeah, and then when we wonder why so many of those guys fall, it's because they've been put in a position that God never intended.
The pressure, it's the pressure to succeed. And I want to be clear, I'm not condemning big churches or anything like that. I'm merely just from an observational standpoint, offering maybe a difference of viewpoint. I don't claim to be good at a bunch of things, but I got big feet and I'm good at stepping on folks' toes. But I think really what I'm trying to lean into is a word of caution, because when we look at that Acts chapter 2 church, ecclesia, if you will, every single thing that they did revolved around one word, and that is relationship.
Yeah. I mean, that's why the church exists.
Yeah.
You know, it's our relational link to heaven on this side.
Well, and if the narrow way is by way of relationship, then what our calling is, that's what that Galatians chapter 6, right?
Yeah.
Is being in a place that you have a relationship that is strong enough and trustworthy enough to be able to lean into that. Hey, brother, I love you. You're missing the mark. Mm-hmm. Let's walk this out together and figure it out. And man, the crazy thing is you knew me about that long whenever you did that for me. And this wasn't meant to be a Taylor and Nathan therapy session here, but
our stories are intertwined.
Man.
I mean, we can't talk about my last 3 years without including Taylor, because of, you know, your journey is tied to me and my journey is tied to you. It really is.
Well, even mine is tied in the fact that even as I listen to you now and we step back into the three categories of the people that we encounter when the break occurs, and you categorize those guys very well. One of the things the Lord said to me when you were sharing that is some breaks are necessary, and it reveals who's really walking with you and who's walking around you.
Right.
And God has put men around you to walk with you. I know when we experienced our step away, we didn't do a bunch of reaching back because we didn't want to cause chaos in the body. And then we really got to find out as we walked, because we weren't able to speak to a lot of people, it was one of those points where we had to step away, and it broke relationships. And I love how you leaned into real relationships, and I'll use it in a country boy category. When you're churning milk, what rises to the top is what you want to shave off, and that's going to become what you use later down the road, the milk we're going to drink tomorrow. But that butter that's setting up, so it's just that those real relationships rise.
Yep.
And that's what that intense fire is that you mentioned earlier. There is a refining fire, and God is refining you with a purpose so much greater. I have a book that's supposed to be written that I wrote down like a year ago. And as you're talking, I get to be in your book. Taylor gets to be in your book. This group gets to be in your book. And the book is called, and I share this with you, and I don't care who tries to steal it. So the book is called, it's written, and it's called Freedom to Follow After the Fall. Mm-hmm. Freedom to follow after the fall. It's a choice that we get to make. Lord, I know that I'm a sinner and I fail. And I know the restorative power is in you. And I surrender myself completely to be restored there. Mm-hmm. Because no matter what man says or does, they're not the ones that we're leaning back into as John did at the table with Christ. We're going to lean back into his chest. We're going to be restored in his presence. We're going to follow after him. And those who are supposed to go with us will go with us. And we're not trying to drag anyone kicking and screaming, but God has called you to move through this process because he's not done with you. He's good. That restoration is to be used on the other side. Remember, when David sinned with Bathsheba, God had the authority to remove him. Mm-hmm. The wages of sin is death. So God had the authority to kill him at that moment. He had the authority to remove him from being king, but he allowed him to have to, this is good. He allowed him to have to go through being chased and watching his daughter Tamar, hearing about her rape and his son being beheaded and him on the run until God brought him back to a place to where he was on his face like you and I. And he cried out to God. God heard his cry and he restored him. And he was still called a man after God's own heart. So I think that reality is it doesn't matter what everyone else says, because David also had to go back to the throne and hear the whispers in the halls and know that they're only speaking what I gave them the ability to speak through my choices and my action. Mm-hmm. So, I love that point right there.
Yeah, and I think with that, the idea is that if we're really, I had a friend that I heard him say one. As a matter of fact, this guy went through a similar situation to me. He had to resign a church with a moral failure about a year before me, and I'll be honest with you, I haven't talked to him since. I tried to reach out to him. I think his number got changed. I really don't know how to get a hold of him, but he made a comment one time. He said, if you're effective in your ministry, you'll pastor more people that never even darken the door of your church than you will in your church. And, I think about that and for me, okay, now, at this stage, how do I shepherd? How can I continue to shepherd, not necessarily under the authority of being a church's pastor? And man, I've thrown little pity parties, where I'm like, oh gosh, I don't know how God's going to use me or if he wants to, but the truth is I'm seeing how God is using me and my story to shepherd people. Most importantly, to speak into the life of men who have fallen.
And those on the verge.
Yeah. And
Those who don't realize that, hey, you're closer than you think.
Yeah. And really, David, if I'm being frank, my role in the last 3 years has actually been to speak to more men who have actually crashed and burned than the warning to the ones that may.
on their way.
And I want to be that warning. I want to, because I don't want to see anybody go through what I went through.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting how people either have come to me or have been brought to me. People are like, a guy goes through a fall like this, a divorce, an affair. I've had another, criminal charges, things like that. And they're like, man, you should go have a conversation with Nathan. And then these people call me up and, I talk to them about the journey. How do you deal with the guilt and shame? How do you accept and take ownership of your wrongdoings? How do you lean into God and His grace in the midst of the consequence that's raining down on you? I think that I have a lot to give there, and that's been a ministry.
You really do, and because a guy can write a book and tell people about stuff like that's never gone through it. But I think the numbers that Taylor was giving earlier, you are taking numbers off that page. Mm-hmm. By being able to lean into these men that you're leaning into, you're able to take numbers off that page, that suicide number, that self-harm number, that drowning addiction number. Hey man, there is restoration after this, but there has to be a death that occurs to oneself to be able to receive that restoration. Yeah, and I love that. Yeah. That is a ministry.
Well, and I think that's a great transition point, that restoration and what, by God's grace, where you're at now. I'd be lying if I told you that the transition point was because we need to take a break because I got to pee, like bad.
Right.
But we're going to pause. So this will complete this episode. We're going to go ahead and record the next episode for those of you that will be listening. Just know that you can't stop here because the story goes on to be just, man, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
But Nathan, if you wouldn't mind, would you mind closing this episode out in prayer?
Yeah, let's talk to God. Let's do it. God, I'm thankful for your grace and your mercy. I've experienced it. I know it. And God, and you've been so good to me, and I don't deserve it. And so, God, it just speaks to your goodness. I know how good you are. I do. Your word says in Nahum 1:7 that that you love us, that you know those who trust in you, and that you're a good God. And God, I'm just glad that I know you, but most importantly that you know me, and that even in the midst of my sin, my brokenness, that you never forsook me.
Yes, Lord.
God, and I thank you for that. Lord, thank you for this group of men and this opportunity to share the story of you, your story of how you work in one broken individual's life.
Amen.
And I pray in Jesus' name.
Amen. Thank you.